Welcome, and thank you to everyone for joining us here today for this Lunch and Learn webinar. This webinar series is part of the TargetCancer Foundation Patient Empowerment Program, which also includes extensive rare cancer patient educational resources available on our website, as well as all of our past webinars. Today, we have 4 truly incredible panelists whose advocacy work is spurred by personal experience and is making a tremendous impact on the field of rare cancer research. I am so grateful to them for sharing their insights and experience with all of us. I have learned and continue to learn so much from these 4 women and feel so lucky to know and work together with all of them. I'm Kristen Palma, the president of TargetCancer Foundation. For those of you joining us who are not familiar with TargetCancer Foundation, we were founded in 2009 by my husband, Paul, after he was diagnosed with a rare cancer, cholangiocarcinoma. Our experience was like so many facing a rare cancer: lack of treatment options, no standard of care protocol, no research to look to for answers, and no community of support. He was young and healthy, a new dad, and could not believe that just because of his cancer was rare, he had no options. He felt that if the tools were there to understand his cancer, there might be a treatment that could help him. And this is why he started TargetCancer Foundation. After he died, our family kept it going, and we're here now 16 years later, in a very changed landscape for cholangiocarcinoma patients, thanks to advocacy, research, and people like all of the panelists here today who are fighting, like Paul did, for options for themselves, for their loved ones, and for other rare cancer patients today. Each speaker will discuss her own experience and the changes that they are seeing since taking on this work. Our first panelist today is patient advocate Katie Doble, who many of you may be familiar with from her writing and also the time that she gives assisting other patients. We were so fortunate to have Katie as our keynote speaker at our 2023 think tank on advancing precision medicine and rare cancers. And we thank you for being here today, Katie. Katie, you can come on.
Got it. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Kristen, so much for that. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk with all of you about my experience becoming a patient advocate. My diagnosis story in a nutshell: in 2014, when I was 32 years old, I was diagnosed with a rare form of melanoma called ocular melanoma. It had originated the year prior in my eyeball, then ended up spreading to my liver. And I was given 16 months to live. And when we asked my doctor about clinical trials, she responded, that would be very expensive. My dad, thankfully, is a physician, and he helped guide me. I went on to enroll in 4 clinical trials all over the country over the course of the next 7.5 years. And my 4th clinical trial, TIL therapy, rendered me no evidence of disease, and I have been no evidence of disease for 3.5 years now. So I began my patient advocacy work in the midst of being a stage 4 cancer thriver, is what I called myself. And it started when I was given an award, the Courage Award by the Melanoma Research Foundation, and they asked me to give a talk. And as I got up on stage and shared my story, just something lit up inside me. Like I was like, this is it. This is my purpose. This is what I'm meant to do. And so for me, advocacy really evolved just through manifestation. So I originally, when I was diagnosed, wrote a blog series about my experience and my diagnosis when I was diagnosed, when it was contained in my eyeball. And writing for me has always been something that's very therapeutic. And so for me, my advocacy has been a blend of writing, of speaking, and patient advocacy just, I think, can take on a lot of forms, including coaching other patients. And I do that quite frequently as well. And so I manifested by telling people what I wanted to do. I was partnering with a lot of nonprofits, meeting a lot of nonprofits, and I was telling them, hey, if you need a speaker, if you need a patient story. So I was just planting the seeds and telling my doctors, and it just kind of snowballed from there. Every time that I gave a talk, I'd walk off the stage and somebody else would come up to me and say, hey, I have this event coming up next year. I think your story would really align very well with that. I've spoken twice with my doctor who saved my life, which was a dream. I told him the day that I had my major surgery and I was rendered no evidence of the disease, I said, I'm going to share a stage with you one day. And he laughed at me nervously and said, we'll see. And he said, let's give it 10 years. And like a year and a half later, I shared a stage with him for the first time. I've partnered with the Melanoma Research Alliance. I am currently the mission speaker for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network's Fork Cancer event happening this summer. And I have also really found my niche. So my niche has been in the clinical trial space. When I was diagnosed, there were no FDA approved options for my type of rare cancer. And 11 years later, there are still no FDA approved options for my type of cancer and my specific biomarkers. And so I have really found that the clinical trial space is a space where stories like mine have a massive impact. And then also within the rare disease space, because there just aren't, there are a lot of patients who can raise their voices when it's rare. And so I've made a commitment to share my story, to give hope to my peers who are still in the fight, and to remind the people working in the community why they're doing what they do and the impact that they're having. Trying to think if there's anything else. One other thing that I did to get involved was the university hospital where I did 2 of my 4 clinical trials here locally has a patient and family advisory council. And so I joined that a couple of years ago and served a 2-year assignment with that. And that was a really, really cool way to get involved, to show they need to understand what's the patient experience here. And then I've recently joined Walgreens. They have a clinical trial arm, and I'm on the board for that as well. I will end with LinkedIn. I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn. I met my husband on LinkedIn. I'm a headhunter, so I use that as my main platform. And every time that I go to an event, I link in with every single person that I met at that event. And I share a lot of content on LinkedIn. And I think that Kristen originally reached out to me via LinkedIn. So it's a really great platform and tool. So make sure that as you are growing your advocacy, that you're making the connections, you're keeping those connections, and that you're using a platform like that to share articles, to share content, and to connect with other people in the community. So hopefully that was not too long, but that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Katie. You are so generous with your time. I know how many patients are so grateful for what you do. I hear about it from so many, and I know it's not always easy to do that. So we're all very grateful to you. And so happy that you're here. Now I just want to introduce Suzanne Vincze. Suzanne, hello.
Hello.
Is the vice president and co-founder of the Max Vincze Foundation. And we're so happy to have you here today, Suzanne.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Jim and Kristen and Samantha, for putting this webinar on together today. I'm really honored to be here with everybody. I'm Suzanne Vincze. Like Kristen said, I'm the co-founder of the Max Vincze Foundation. And my path to advocacy began pretty suddenly. In September of 2021, my 23-year-old son, Max, died from a rare aggressive cancer called nut carcinoma. And he was diagnosed in June of 2021, and he died 3 months later. Highly aggressive, no treatment. The journey through that experience was so frustrating because at the time, this was in 2021 at the end, and there was no information on the internet. Doctors hadn't even heard of the disease. And so, we went through a normal protocol of cancer, and as a newbie of cancer, our family knew cancer survivors and knew this sort of overarching cancer treatment and survival. And we go into it thinking he's young and, oh, he's going to survive this. And what we didn't know was the reality of rare cancer. So after his death, we needed answers. We just researched as much as we could. My husband has a scientific background, so he would scour all the scientific papers out there. And most of those papers were written by one sole researcher at Dana-Farber. And we reached out to Dr. French, who ran the nut carcinoma lab there. And he was extremely generous with his time, and basically kind of laid out the reality of rare cancer and what it's like to be a rare cancer researcher and the limited funds you get. Not only that, clinical trials are scarce. So after that conversation, we knew exactly what we were going to do. We wanted to create a foundation to help bolster his research that would eventually turn into more clinical trials. So that experience of finding information on the disease was really important to us too. So we created a website, we created our foundation, and immediately we were lucky enough to be able to fund a genetically engineered mouse model for this disease. And that really, it turned out another scientific paper with unprecedented research that came out of that is now awaiting funding for clinical trials. So that was really good. But I have to say, after 3 years being, having our foundation and funding that research we did at Dana-Farber, the greatest impact we've had was the patient advocacy part, and that is connecting with other families. Most people die of this disease. So we get these families like looking for answers like we did. And so we have been able to, I love the word coach that Katie used. We kind of took on a role of coaching families through these, navigating this, finding experts and finding clinical trials that are out there, et cetera. And as we started to become friends with these families, we created, and this is going on right now, we just decided within the last couple of months that this disease needs a national organization. And so together with these families, we've created the Nut Carcinoma Alliance. And right now we are working with a web developer to create a portal for the newly diagnosed to get answers, support, a community. Not only that, the dual purpose for researchers, that they can collaborate. Key word here is collaboration. And so that is something we're really proud of and excited to see being built. But lessons learned, you had mentioned lessons learned. Our lessons is just every little bit counts. You make one move and there's like open doors, like many open doors after that move. So with our community, nut carcinoma in 2021 had 1 researcher. Now, to date, we have 5. So that has been huge. And that's just due to the families that get involved and the people that have lost loved ones spur the research. We have research partners on the West Coast and on the East Coast and in between. So I'm going to end with that. I also love LinkedIn because this is how we're finding families. We post about, certain things we're funding, and people that are trying to find information about this disease find us through LinkedIn. And that's how we've actually built our little community. So that is it. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. I just love everything that you said so much, and I know that it's incredible how much you guys have achieved in such a short period of time. That is just so amazing to hear how many new researchers are working on nut carcinoma now. And I do absolutely believe it is the families, it's the voices, it's the patients, the advocates who really move the needle. We see it all the time, and it's just so critical. And I know how important it is to the researchers as well. And we've heard that so many times from researchers that, not only does it motivate them to meet the families and to know that they have that support, but also to have those partnerships and know who is behind the work that they're doing, who is it really making an impact for. So I just think it's just such a special, and we have had that experience too, when you really create these relationships with the researchers, is meaningful to both sides. And that collaboration is just critical. So congratulations on all of that incredible work. And thank you. So next, we have another dear friend to Target Cancer Foundation who's here, Dana Deighton, another incredible patient advocate who has worked for many years in the field, both as a patient advocate and as a professional. She is now the communications director at the Melanoma Research Alliance and has been, again, like a dear friend to Target Cancer, a speaker at our think tanks as well. And thank you again for being here, Dana.
Thank you so much, Kristen and Jim. I consider you dear friends as well, and I'm so grateful for everything that you have done and continue to do to advocate and improve the lives of everybody with rare cancers. My journey started much like others. You know, I wasn't expecting to have a cancer diagnosis. I was living my life. I had 3 young kids. I was relatively well and healthy, and in 2012, I presented with lupus-like symptoms that seemed so out of nowhere because I had never had an autoimmune issue, and they were really debilitating, and I was very upset by them. And I thought, how am I going to live with this? Lupus is terrible, and I don't know how I'm going to maintain my healthy lifestyle. Well, that actually was just the beginning of a diagnostic odyssey, and fast forward, I didn't really have lupus. It was cancer masquerading as lupus because my immune system had gone quite haywire. And the real diagnosis was stage 4 esophageal cancer, which was actually a more formidable foe than the lupus. And it did kind of stop me in my tracks. I had not even ever heard of it. And, you know, just after doing a little bit of cursory research, I learned that esophageal cancer, especially at a late stage, it usually impacts older men that, you know, have had a lifetime of you know, different habits that I hadn't yet had, you know, drinking and smoking and maybe poor diets and less exercise and things like that. That's not always the case, but that is who it primarily affects. So I found myself on this island. You know, how in the world did I get it? I was a 43-year-old woman at the time, and I couldn't find anybody like me that had the same situation. And that makes you feel so alone. And of course, as a stage 4 cancer patient, when you're being told to get your affairs in order and enjoy what little time you have left with your kids, you already feel alone. And all you want is the comfort of someone else who has had the same experience. But I couldn't find anybody. The few people that I could find, generally speaking, were men. And if they survived, they didn't really remember anything about their journey, and they didn't want to talk about it because it was so traumatic. And that's really just kind of what revved my engines. I was like, first of all, I've got to find a way out of this. I can't leave my 3 kids. I've got to figure this out. And I knew that I was healthy, like in so many other ways. I had continued to, you know, exercise a lot and work full time, mostly just because that's just who I am. But I really began this quest to seek the best medical care that I could find. And that's where my advocacy kind of started, because as I was visiting major academic centers, even some of the most renowned physicians, you know, or I'm sorry, renowned physicians were saying, you know, we really don't know what we can do for you besides some chemo, and we'll see what happens. But nobody had any extra, you know, steps in mind after that, because they didn't think I would make it based on the data that they had. And so I found myself thinking, I'm going to have to like carve a path of my own. And that's why I kind of hopscotched around to find a team that would actually listen to me and you know, look a little bit deeper and turn over the rocks and not just look at the data that they had, because the data they had did not represent me. And I wanted to make sure that they treated me as an individual. I wanted to make sure they treated my cancer and my specific biology with my specific history, and not throw me in that bucket with a bunch of men over 65. And a lot of the institutions just really didn't have the um, I don't know, the imagination to do that, I guess. You know, they see a lot of patients, and they do have to stick to standards of care for a reason. But there are people that are sometimes willing to look a little bit deeper. And as I like to say, they saw more life in me than they saw in cancer when I finally found my team. And after that, I continued to do a lot of research and I asked a lot of questions because, again, I was willing to make myself a guinea pig. And I said, have you ever heard of this? Or have you ever heard of that? Mixing this chemo with that radiation. And what about the abscopal effect? And every time I brought these questions to my physicians, they were like, oh my God, where did she come up with this? And how are we going to answer her? We have to. It kind of put them in a position to also do a little more research. And it kept the dialogue kind of in, you know, in my lane too. I wasn't just listening to the doctors, they were listening to me. And it made it very collaborative. And I think at the end of the day, doing that for many years saved my life because it wasn't all easy. Like those answers still didn't come just because I asked the questions. I had a lot of treatments that didn't really get me much further down the road. I had some really tough decisions I had to make, like an esophagectomy, which has a very high rate of morbidity. But looking at, my options and the data that I had gathered, to me, it seemed like that was potentially the best. And since then, I did have a recurrence because that often does happen with stage 4 esophageal cancer. And by the time it did happen, there were a lot more tests available and there was a lot more information around immunotherapy. And even though it had not been approved for my indication, my physician team had this thought that perhaps maybe I was MSI high. And they were able to ask for use of an immunotherapy drug from the pharmaceutical company off trial. And that was really the silver bullet for me. If I had not had that, I would have been back on chemo, which probably wouldn't have worked for very long because I had had so much of it. And so that's why I advocate now, because you've got to keep looking for answers and you've got to keep looking for research because you've got to live one more day until the science can leapfrog ahead of the cancer. And I really believe in that. And I counsel a lot of other patients, and I see that idea working for them too. So I'll just end with, I really do believe in the power of participation and the power of connection, because without either of those, you really lose control. And participation can be anything. It can be talking to your doctors. It can be doing research. It can be reaching out to others. It can be joining, counseling groups and things like that. But all of those things keep the dialogue going and keep them in your control. And then the power of connection is probably the most important thing because that is what enables you to find people that, may or may not share your experience. It may not even be the same cancer, but they might have just a little nugget or a kernel of an idea that you could then take to your team and say, hey, I heard about this. Does it work? Can we talk about it? And I really do believe that that is what saved my life like several times. So I really, hope that people will reach out to others. I've used my career to try to help facilitate that as well. And happy to always be that person for someone else. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Dana. Again, just so many important messages there. And one of them, of course, is just finding the team that's right for you. I think that's just something so important to remember. The team that's going to listen to you and going to think about options that may not be the standard, like you were saying. And it's not always easy to be your own advocate, but it is so important. And I think what you said about the science is changing every single day. And that's something we always say to patients. It really is. I mean, the changes that we've seen in these 15 years have been just extraordinary. And you have to believe that, like you said, one more day, there's another new development, and just keeping that in mind to push you forward, and making sure that the doctors also are on top of that. So thank you so much, Dana, for being here and sharing that. So our last panelist today is another wonderful friend and just incredible person that I've gotten to know in this past year. Naomi Natale is the co-founder of cureMEC, the Myoepithelial Carcinoma Project. And before Naomi starts to just talk a little bit about the work that she's been doing, we're going to watch a video from her foundation, and I'm going to go off camera so we can play that, and then we'll be back. Hi, Naomi.
And thanks so much. Thanks so much to you and Jim and Target Cancer for having us, inviting us. And I'm here to speak also on behalf of my husband, who's just a real force. We're in it together for sure. So it always feels important to share that video for two reasons, and I appreciate everybody who watched it. The first is to honor our son's journey, but hoping that other patients might see themselves in it as well, to honor, the really traumatic and difficult moments alongside the beautiful ones, the memories, the mundane moments of our lives, and because that's what this is about. That's what everyone is fighting for here. And the other reason is to honor every single person who has dedicated themselves to this space as a researcher, as a clinician, as a funder, as an advocacy organization, whether you're in pharma or biotech, however you're approaching this. I'm not sure how often you do get to engage with the families whose work means everything. I mean, what I can say is that in our darkest hours and years, you are carving a window of light for us to hope and dream in. And it's the prayer that we all live on. And I grew up in New Jersey, and that is a Bon Jovi reference, but I don't really know of a better way to explain it. To quickly bring us up to date where Sebas is, I do want to share that 2 weeks ago he turned 6 years old. It feels remarkable to be here. He does have 4 nodules in his lungs that are continuing to be monitored very closely in 3-month intervals. But I'm deeply grateful to share that they have been stable for a year now, and we don't take a single day of that for granted. But similar to many other stories that we've heard today, when Sebas was diagnosed, there was no information about MEC. You might have seen a couple articles published, but no doctor that we had ever heard of it, had ever treated it. There was no treatment option. Surgery is what we were told. We were told the prognosis was very poor. We were just given a really intense chemo treatment and protocol. And, one thing to just take a second to talk about is the lack of drugs available for children. I think all of our cancer patients feel this, but with children, our priorities have just not been focused in that direction for decades. And while in the past 30 years, there have been over 200 drugs developed and approved by the FDA for adults, there have only been 7. And that is a result of the fact that only 4% of national cancer research funding goes to pediatric cancer. And, when it goes to rare pediatric cancer, that really goes down to 0. So like a lot of these other families, what we learned very quickly is that, okay, if we're on a mission, to save our son and others in his same situation, we need to start a foundation. We need to raise funds. We need to find the researchers. There was not one researcher researching MEC at the time. And then bring the community together, all while, trying to kind of understand this landscape and where to put our attention. So that's kind of been our journey for the past almost 3 years. But we, at this point, we find ourselves in a really kind of extraordinary situation. We feel, in the sense of, one, we in the past year partnered with a Dr. Brian Van Tine, who's at Washington University in St. Louis. He's an extraordinary clinician, researcher, and also just person. He is somebody who is mission driven for, like, when we look at what the mission is in that video, and very passionate and committed to collaboration. But in the past month, in his lab, they have developed the first MEC cell line. So that's just such a huge milestone for this research and moving forward. And one thing in terms of moving forward is just this team. We're talking about teams that have come together in this space, and just how remarkable it is, and the kind of the hope that we are all operating and moving forward in because of them, and working together.
Thank you so much, Naomi. And I'm so grateful to you for sharing that video. And I think it shows the urgency, that every patient feels, but I think it's just an incredible example of why we have to act now, and why every advocate is doing this work. We can't wait. So, and I think that the team, everyone can put their cameras on now. We're going to talk together, but I think everyone here has talked about the teams that they have found and the people that they've collaborated with. And I just love that, everyone has found someone who's really been behind them and championing their work and the needs. One of the questions that we received that I thought was a great place to start here, and would resonate with this entire group. So everyone just jump in. Was, how do advocacy groups reach out to others to collaborate on organizational project partnership and support? So I think everyone has had examples, some that you've already talked about, but just, how important it is to collaborate with each other, with the doctors, with researchers, but also with each other as advocacy groups, as we've all been doing here. But Naomi, I don't know if you want to start on that.
Yeah. And I just really appreciate this question so much because, Michael and I, cureMEC is a very small foundation. It is just the two of us, that nobody is paid. We're working, at all spare moments that we don't have and in nights, but what is truly just so humbling and mind-blowing to us right now is to really sit back and look at this team that we are working with. And because each of these people are giants in their field, and to think that not only are they willing to work with us, but they're willing to work together. And I just want to take a little bit of time to kind of elaborate on that and really talk about them. So because, well, I'll just go ahead. There's, as I mentioned, Dr. Brian Van Tine, who I think is going to be the godfather of MEC research. There's Jane Wilkinson, who I'm sure many of you know, who is a giant and just a force. She's with the co-founder of the Can Collaborate organization, which this is their mission. They are radical collaboration to advance research in expedient time. There's our darling angel, Barbara Van Hare at the Rare Cancer Research Foundation, who is truly an angel, but she has connected us to so many people. She connected us to Dr. Van Tine, but also through the Rare Cancer Research Foundation and that partnership and her colleague Marshall Thompson, we are creating the first MEC patient registry, the first MEC biobank, the first MEC data commons. And that is also an organization whose absolute mission is about collaboration, because their point is to create all this material so that we don't have to deal with the challenging thing of institutional sharing, that researchers can go to this one place and access the resources they need to do the work. There's also Corey Painter, who is just of the rarest breed possible and just the gem, who, straddles both the advocacy and the science. She's one of our scientific advisory members, and TargetCancer, who's been working with us as a mentor and in so many ways of bringing people to us, but also Jamie Chi at the Drug Repurposing Hub, Muni Sang and Carmen Rios at the Cancer Cell Factory, and Dr. Kim Segmeister, who's at Dana-Farber and bringing MEC to the PEDDEP program, that is a collaboration with St. Jude and Broad. And I say those names to highlight the point that collaboration is actually about relationships, right? It is about people who all share that same exact mission, the reason why we're all doing the work, and it doesn't matter how we get to the goal, and whoever is going to lead it and however we're going to do it, we're going to get there together. And, just a couple of days ago, Michael and I were on this call with some of these people, and you're hearing them and they're saying, okay, as soon as I get the cell line, this is what I'm going to do with it. And as soon as we get this information, we're going to share it with you and you're going to share it with us. And, and it was, like I said, incredibly humbling. But if you step back, it was hard actually not to be emotional, because it was like you were watching a soccer game. That's why they call it the beautiful game, right? Because people understand that we're going to pass this on, and you're going to pass it back, and we're going to store the goal. And what's crazy is that I wouldn't have said this a few months ago, but I have no doubt that this team is winning the cup. And the only questions are in what time frame, who else is going to be with us, and what will we have learned along the way? Not just about MEC science, but about what it means to work together in this radical collaborative way for research, towards a goal that we can bring that, those lessons forward in the work that we do, both in our professional lives, but also in our personal ones.
I mean, you can't say it better than that. I don't want anyone else. Does anyone else want to join in on that? I mean, it's a perfect example. And I think for us, we started very similarly, just me and my brother, and well, Paul at first, and the mentors that stepped up and helped us at the beginning. I mean, we wouldn't be here today. And seeing that those connections are just key. Yeah, the connections are definitely key, and you'd have to keep passing that forward. But I just remember feeling so much like I could sleep a little better knowing that there are these, because you feel like you have no control. You don't know how to do any of the science or any of this, and knowing that there were people out there that were stepping up and doing it and listening to you, I could sleep better knowing that they were doing that work, just a little bit. It just eased that burden a little bit. Dana, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I love that you brought up the registries, because I feel like there are a million of them out there. Some of them talk to each other and some of them don't. And we just need to get to a place where they all talk to each other, because I feel like that would make us feel a lot less alone. Like, the fact of the matter is, I wasn't the only 43-year-old woman with esophageal cancer. Surely there were others out there. I just couldn't find them. And yes, maybe it was a little bit early, in the time when all of these patient portals and communities had popped up. But either way, registries would have been a much easier way to find somebody just like me that, shared a similar experience. And, maybe I could have even found out, like, what treatments they had or didn't have. And I feel like it's just something that our world doesn't concentrate enough on. And I worry that today, now with all of the cuts, there's even going to be, less of that collaboration going on, and we're going to lose ground. And one of the jobs that I had before working at the Melanoma Research Alliance was for Scripps Research. And Scripps had an NIH grant for the All of Us research study, which is a huge longitudinal study. It's kind of like the Uber registry. And I had such high hopes for that, because you never know, how people end up with things, the diagnosis that they have. I mean, maybe there's something, underlying all of it, like based on where we live or the food we've eaten or the jobs we do, that, will help answer some questions. But you can't do that without registries and longitudinal research. Now I'm at the Melanoma Research Alliance, and we have a rare melanoma registry. And that is to help people connect and to find answers for people with mucosal melanoma, acral melanoma, and certain types of cutaneous melanoma. There's already an existing registry for ocular, but that just goes to show that some of these registries are out there, but they're not always speaking to each other. And we know that even with melanoma, there are links to other cancers too. So I just would love to see more work behind that to help all of us, but I know it's going to take a lot.
And thank you for that segue, because I know we wanted to spend a little time today just talking about this topic of that everyone, I think, is so concerned about, or should be very concerned about right now. It's an extremely difficult time for patients, for advocates, for researchers, as we're watching these funding cuts happening to research that, is not just cutting the research funding, but halting, work that's been done for decades, really stopping it in its tracks, and progress that's been made. And, the impact on already underfunded rare cancers, I think, we can all agree is going to be even more devastating. And it's extremely, extremely difficult time. And, one of the things, talking about collaboration, again, that we have been doing here at TargetCancer, and with this group in particular, is that we've pulled together, I think we were just all really worried and stressed and started talking to each other. And then we decided to come together as like a working group. We're just getting started, but it was in response to all of this collective concern among advocates and among ourselves, just to sort of think about what we can be doing to make sure that the rare cancer voice is being heard, and to have some kind of opportunities to do something right now. And one of the things about being an advocate, I think, is just being flexible and going beyond your individual disease. And that's what we're trying to do here with this group and at TargetCancer, just partnering together to make an impact here. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. So we meet together on a pretty regular basis. We're supporting each other in our outreach efforts. And we're also developing some resources to support others to have the opportunity to speak out. We're going to be putting together a toolkit and some resources that will be on our website and that we will share. So please, anyone who's interested and wants to get involved, just reach out to us. But I wanted to give a chance to everyone here, to talk a little bit about what they've been doing. Everyone here on this webinar has been doing their own outreach and advocacy to try to make a difference here. So if anybody wants to talk about what they've been doing, I don't know, Katie, if you want to start with your interviews and op-eds that you've been writing.
Yeah. So one of the things that I did that's led to a lot of media coverage for me is I got connected with the head of PR at UPMC and had an informal meeting with her a couple of years ago, told her my story, and she was like, wow. I'm like, you guys saved my life. I love you. And I said, use me. If you ever need a patient voice to go with a doctor's story, use me. And my doctor's study on the therapy that he gave me was published in Nature Communications, and the Washington Post picked that up and did a story on him. And Cindy at UPMC said, I actually have a patient. Do you want a patient? Journalists always want a patient. It's one thing that the doctors are doing this work, but if they can tell the human personal story behind it, that's gold for them. And so that journalist interviewed me, and Cindy at UPMC sat in on the interview. And at the end of the interview, he was like, I don't want to diminish her story by tacking it on to Dr. Kamula's work. And I don't want to overshadow his work with her story. So I'm going to do a separate story. So the day before, the day after it was announced that NIH was potentially going to be slashing cancer research funds, my story ran in the Washington Post. And that really sort of catapulted things. I wrote an op-ed that I still haven't placed, but I have a friend who works at CBS in Colorado, and as a group here at with TargetCancer Foundation, through this group, we've talked about the importance of local. There's so much noise happening nationally. There's so many headlines right now, and it's really hard to get attention nationally. So if you can take your story and get attention locally, that is going to have a massive impact. If we're all telling our stories and screaming our stories locally, that's really important. And so I shared my op-ed with my friend who's at CBS, and she pitched my story, and they came and they did a short segment on my story that ran on CBS local news. So those have been 2 or 3 kind of big things that have happened in recent months. And again, it's sharing articles when I do see, and we do this collectively as a group, we all are connected on LinkedIn, we all follow each other on LinkedIn, and we all share posts, articles that we see. And then if Kristen posts something interesting, or Jim or TargetCancer Foundation, I'm going to share that. And so we're just sort of elevating each other's stories and voices to just make a lot of noise and make sure that people know that we're here and we're not going to shut up. So be the squeaky wheel.
Yes, that's so important. I mean, I know, we all know people at the NIH and NCI right now, and from one day to the next, they don't know if they're going to have a job, if they're going to lose their funding. We know patients who've been kicked off of clinical trials, and that is the truth, even though I know that, I've heard some people say, well, I don't know if I don't know if that's really true. It is really true. It's happening. And the funding that's being stopped, like we said, is taking us back to those days that we were talking about before, where there were none of these tools that are so critical for rare cancers, especially, but all cancers. We cannot go back 20 years where those, cell lines and registries and, those tools and all of that my brilliant work that's been done is just stopped. I mean, we cannot. So I think what you said, Katie, and what everyone's been doing here, Suzanne wrote an incredible op-ed as well. Is like you said, whether it's local, however, you know, the squeaky wheel, and just making sure it's real and getting the impact of these cuts out, because it's really going to affect everyone, because we're all going to be affected at some point by cancer. So I just want to, I know we could do a whole webinar just on this topic, and maybe we will, but I want to, before we close, just give a chance to anyone else, if anyone else just wants to talk about that, or any other suggestions of how people can get involved. And then, of course, you know, check our website, and we will be sharing resources as well. But if anyone else has anything else they want to share.
I will just say, I'm going to put, in the spirit of high kicks for LinkedIn, I'm going to put my LinkedIn in the chat. And so please link in with me. I think we can, or maybe we could just do a follow-up email, Kristen, with all of our LinkedIns. Maybe that would be easier. And so, like, let's all make sure that we're connecting and that we're elevating each other's voices and stories, and just sharing as much as we can.
Definitely. That's a great idea. Naomi, and
I just really wanted to recognize, you know, TargetCancer Foundation right here and what you're doing, because I feel like for a lot of us, we are so focused on our cancer, and we have to be, we're in our own silo. We have to, because nobody else is going to, right? But if you look out at the bigger picture, right, to advocate for the space in general, it really requires somebody to step in, kind of like a union, to organize us, to bring our voices together. And it's really, you know, like the math of a protest, where it's one person, we're just saying something, but we show up to a protest because we know our body represents our voice in that space. And it is that collective of voices that really is what moves people and shifts under, you know, gets to the values that we're all holding, and that we want other people to do that. And you just have done such an amazing job to step in that role. And it's just an honor, and we really appreciate it to be with you.
thank you, Natalie, Naomi. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I just feel so lucky to work with all of you. It motivates me every day, and I just have loved, I hate that we all know each other, but I love that I've gotten to know you all. Suzanne, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Oh, no, I just said ditto. Naomi speaks beautifully about everything. I just wanted to ditto her.
I totally agree. And I'm going to borrow a line that I learned from another advocate, but it's so true. Cancer is the worst way to meet the best people.
Yep. Well, I think that's yes, exactly. It's true. It is true. And I think that's a perfect way to wrap up here today. I thank all of you for sharing, you know, your experiences and all that you're doing to make such incredible impact. And thank everyone for joining. This will be posted. So, you know, if you want to share it with someone, we will have this up on our website as well. But we're just so grateful for all of this incredible work that's happening. And anything else I'm forgetting? No, I think that's it. So wishing everyone well, and thank you so much. And keep watching the space for information and resources. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.